D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, and David Janes here with you as we were all getting comfortable in the studio. We were all talking about, how late did you stay up to watch the hockey game last night? Ian Safar said, I was so tired, I tapped out after regulation. I fell asleep at the beginning of overtime, but woke up roughly in the middle. Derek, you said you made it to about where?
No, I watched it until the end. But I when they went into overtime, like the intermission, I turned the channel. And for about 20, 25 minutes, I turned it back on. They hadn't even started the overtime yet. So I got a chance to watch it all up until, the last goal, which was, textbook goal, by Edmonton. So it was a good game to see. And again, if you're just a casual hockey fan, you need to start watching these playoff games because this series will go 7, I believe.
Willie, did you make it through the whole game?
I did. And also, I will even do you one more. I stayed up and watched, not the whole thing, but I watched the Mets
Willie
against the Dodgers, which was still had a
Willie
couple
had
innings left
insomnia.
after it was over. I had spare. I had spare. But that was one heck of a game. My goodness, what a great game. Florida, just for maybe some casual viewers, Florida does not lose games where they take a 2-goal lead. They just don't. And they did last night because the Oilers were that determined. I thought that was
But it was a mistake at the end.
thing.
I think what really cost them in overtime.
Yes, a delay of game penalty.
That cost them.
So as Willie mentioned, this stat, by the way, the Oilers win 4-3 in overtime on a goal, McDavid to Draisaitl. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This stat was going around, I want to say in the second intermission of the game last night, and I'm not usually a jinx type person, but I saw it and I was like, too many people are tweeting about this. Something's going to go wrong. The Panthers were 31-0 when holding a lead at the end of the first or second periods in Stanley Cup final playoff games under Paul Maurice. That was the first time they have lost a playoff game in 3 seasons under Paul Maurice when holding a lead at the end of 20 minutes or at the end of 40 minutes. So that was a big deal. As Willie said, when the Panthers go up, they rarely, if ever, lose. Again, 31-0 before last night. But there was a little bit of a Nashville flavor in this as well. The 2 players who ignited the comeback for the Edmonton Oilers, Victor Arvidsson and Matthias Ekholm. They were down 3-1. Arvidsson scores right after Sam Bennett scores to make it 3-2. Ekholm ties the game at 3-3. Draisaitl wins it in overtime. And after Arvidsson scored, Willie, I went back into his career game log and looked at the Stanley Cup final from 2017. Arvidsson's previous Stanley Cup final goal for the Predators came 8 years ago today. June
wow.
5th, 2017. And that made me feel real old. 8 years ago today, that was Arvidsson's first Stanley Cup final goal. He scored, Willie, what I would describe as a vintage Victor Arvidsson goal, that slap shot from outside. You don't see that much anymore from the forward position, but Arvidsson was always really good at that, especially off the rush coming down the wing. He scores. That was a huge goal because the Oilers had a breakdown. Sam Bennett, who is going to get paid this summer, scores to make it 3-1. You think, all right, that might be it. Arvidsson scores, I think, like a minute or so later to reignite the Oilers. But big goals last night from former Predators players Arvidsson and Ekholm.
And that is why, as I watch more, and also the Panthers kind of like being the villains, right? And we'll talk to Elliot about this as he's covering the series. Elliot Friedman will join us at 1. But the Panthers kind of like being the bad guy. They like being the ones that you hate to play against, and that's what makes them great. But not only for that reason, but for what you mentioned, I'm really rooting for Matthias Ekholm and Victor Arvidsson. Those guys are so classy. They won a lot of games when they were in their prime with the Predators. And obviously Ekholm is still at the edge of his prime. He's really made a big difference for them. But Victor Arvidsson is the one I'm most happiest for, because I think, Adam, it's fair to say that in the last 3 or 4 seasons, he's really never recaptured his peak when he was with the Predators, and he was inspiring the crowd with the RV hustle stuff. He'll go into anywhere, and he's tiny, right? But he'll take a beating, and he gets everybody's attention because of just how hard he works. And guys like him are really elevating the Oilers right now. They're getting mileage out of guys that a lot of people thought were done, right? That they didn't have much left. Connor Brown and him and Vander Kane. These guys are really Vasily Podkolzin and Kasperi Kapanen, 2 first-round picks from years ago that really hadn't done anything in other places. They were kind of picked up off the scrap heap. Now they're starting to play well for the Oilers, and it's given them a shot in this series.
Well, Arvidsson, he dealt with some serious injuries near the end of his time with the Predators, and his offensive production dipped as a result. And even last season, when he was with the Los Angeles Kings, he played 18 games. He was dealing with, I want to say, a back injury, but he was out of the lineup for most of last season for the Kings. And as you mentioned, Willie, we all know that Victor Arvidsson, he's not a big guy, but he would take a beating early in his career with the Predators. He would get into the dirty areas. He would get into the corners. He would take these huge hits. A lot of Predators fans remember the cross check from behind he took from Robert Bortuzzo when the Predators played the Blues, and that really turned things the wrong way in his career, at least with the Predators, at least.
Oh, yeah. He was never the same for the Predators after that.
Right.
And
so
for the rest of it, since then, he's not been the same player. Is that fair to say?
I would say so. But, he's still kicking. He's 32.
He's still kicking.
He's 32 years old. That's hard to believe. I remember covering Victor Arvidsson's NHL debut, and now he's 32 years old. And Mattias Ekholm, and we'll talk about this with Elliot as well. Mattias Ekholm, perennially underrated when he was a member of the Nashville Predators. Those of us who covered the Predators, who watched the Predators, we knew how important Mattias Ekholm was to the Predators. But now he's playing for the Edmonton Oilers. He's been in consecutive Stanley Cup finals. And even after missing a long time, he missed most of the end of the regular season, didn't make his playoff debut this year until the previous game, the last game of the Western Conference Final, because he had been dealing with injury. He is a vital part of that operation. Like he when he's in there, that defense for the Oilers, it lines up just so, and he scores that big goal. I know Mattias Ekholm, Willie, is he's lauded for his defensive ability, but we know that he has offensive game as well, and that was a big goal from Ekholm to tie the game in the third period.
I think just what he's done to get back healthy enough to play at this level with this much on the line says a lot about his grit. You're right. He comes across this really nice, easygoing guy, classy guy, but underneath all that,
vicious.
He's very, very hard-nosed competitor. So he is a very special player that the Predators, I think, going forward, one big thing for them, everybody is really hoping that what they got in return for him, which was quite a bit on the surface, right, pans out to be something that helps the Predators. Tanner Molendyk and Reed Schaefer really are 2 guys that they got for Mattias Ekholm. It remains to be seen what they're going to get. Both of those guys are still really, really young. But you hope when you give up an asset like Mattias Ekholm for all you're giving up, that you get something really good in return.
Oilers win 4-3 in overtime. By the way, a former Predators player, at least one, is guaranteed to win the Stanley Cup because you have Mattias Ekholm and Victor Arvidsson on one side. You have Seth Jones playing for the Florida Panthers. So a former Predators player is guaranteed to win the Stanley Cup. I would venture to guess that most Predators fans, if they had to choose between the two, would choose Ekholm and Arvidsson versus Jones, just because Seth Jones wasn't here for too long, although he was a high draft pick for the Predators. But if you're pulling for the Edmonton Oilers, that also means you're pulling for Corey Perry. So just think about that, Predators fans. Can you imagine Matthias Ekholm handing the Stanley Cup to Corey Perry? That might just make you feel a little bit nauseous just thinking about that. But if you want Ekholm and Arvidsson to win, that's the reality, folks. Corey Perry in the Stanley Cup final for the 5th time in the past 6 years has not won in that span. He was there with the Canadiens and the Stars and the Lightning and the Oilers, has not won. But if Ekholm and Arvidsson win, so does Corey Perry. A bit of a catch-22 there, Willie Donick.
Corey Perry is still among the biggest villains in Predators history.
Absolutely.
He's in the top 5. I would say Patrick Kane and Corey Perry, like the classic going all the way back, are right there. I'm trying to think of who else would be in there. Like Jimmy Vesey would, just for other reasons, is probably on that list. Ryan Suter for sure is on that list.
Did you say Ryan Kessler?
Ryan Kessler is a great one.
Yes,
That's probably
Ryan Kessler.
A great candidate for the
He
top
and Ryan
5.
Johansson butting heads all those years, but that goes way back as well. And Derek,
yes,
that power play goal at the end of the game, McDavid to Draisaitl. And by the way, Leon Draisaitl was being held together with duct tape in the Stanley Cup final last year. He was dealing with several injuries. A healthy Leon Draisaitl makes a gigantic difference in this series for the Edmonton Oilers. But I know the Florida Panthers, they're professionals. I know all of the other teams in the NHL, they're professionals. But if you are a penalty killer on another team and you have to stare down Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, I don't know how you're not wetting yourself.
You're talking
considering the stakes of this game and how dominant those two players are. I mean, if I am a Florida Panthers penalty killer, I'm going, oh geez.
Oh, no. That's the difference, because this team is so evenly matched. The difference is a mistake here, a penalty there, and that costs you the game. They have a penalty in overtime that basically cost them the game. You can't go on it's like going on the court with Michael and Pippen, Michael and Jordan or Pippen, and then say, okay, one of my guys got to come off. You think you're going to win? You think you have a shot? 4-on-5 with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, and they got the 5 and you just have 4. You think you're going to win? That's what happened with Florida. You take a penalty,
a bad one,
bad penalty too. I don't know where he was. Was he trying? I think he was just trying to lift the puck up.
He was trying to clear the zone.
Yeah.
But you can't shoot the puck out of your own zone and have it clear the rink without ricocheting off of something.
Yeah, and
so it was a delay of game penalty.
You can see it in his face too.
He knew it.
I think he knew once he went to the penalty box, it was over. And then when they showed him coming out, he knew it. Yep, this is pretty much, he's going to put this one on himself, because you can't do that when you're going up against a team that is basically your equal.
Paul Maurice had a good quote after the game. It was Tomáš Nosek who committed the penalty. And he was like, we're going to make sure that he doesn't eat alone tonight. We're going to make sure that he has lots of people sitting at his table and reminding him how good he's been for us. But yes, he's going to have to wear that one for a day. So game 2 of the Stanley Cup final is tomorrow night in Edmonton. Also tonight, starting tonight, the NBA finals between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers.
Is anybody excited for that?
Well, it's the typical small market type of argument.
They do have the MVP, meaning OKC.
Right, but I'm wondering, and this is maybe a conversation we can have more in depth at another point, Willie, but I'm wondering if it's finally time to bid farewell to this idea of the face of the NBA. Like, there are a lot of good players in the league. I know LeBron James was that player for a long time, and Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. And you look at these two teams, you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is the NBA MVP. You have Tyrese Halliburton, who has busted out in a big way, especially being the arch villain of the New York Knicks. That raises your profile significantly. A lot of intriguing players in this matchup, but no, like last season, it was the Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks. And then you had the Boston Celtics, which is a marquee franchise. And on the other side, you had Luka Doncic, right? You don't have that in this NBA final. So I'm wondering if it's time perhaps to put we need a face of the NBA to bed.
Yeah, Gilgeous-Alexander is becoming a superstar, right? He's the MVP of the league. And this is always gets me every year. For the last 20 years or so, everybody scoops the NBA MVP. It just comes out one day. Somebody's got the inside to the votes and decides to break it every year. I don't know why that happens, but he's a legit star, and this is maybe where he's going to become a guy that his name catches up with how well he's playing, and that's an incredible team. You see these commercials, and I honestly, when I don't even know the company that does it, but when they started using Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and Chet Holcomb and one of the Jalen Williamses, they have two. They've been using those guys in commercials the last 2 or 3 years. I honestly didn't know who it was. I knew Holmgren because he's so unique looking, right? There's never been a guy in the history of the game that looks or plays like him, so I recognize him. I didn't know how well Gilgeous-Alexander was doing, so they kind of bet and they bought low on him, and his stock is rising up. But D-Mace, wouldn't you say that people really haven't appreciated his greatness yet? But if he wins this series, I think that's going to change.
Yeah, but it's sort of like, Giannis or, some of these other players that are in these smaller markets. You have to do something extraordinary for people, globally to know about you. And it's the same, here in the States. I think, if you're not LeBron or if you're not Steph, then, or maybe a few other guys, then it's hard, or Jokic, it's hard for someone to identify you. Like you said, Shea Gilgeous, I remember him. The reason I remember him, one, is because he was at Kentucky. But he didn't stay at Kentucky long.
Not very long. Right.
Yeah, so you can't, you tend to forget about it because he didn't stay there long. Usually we get a guy, you stay 2-3 years, and it's like, okay, I know this guy or girl. But now it's a year, you lose him, he get in the NBA, and he may not flourish for another 2 or 3 seasons. And that's what happened with Shea. And now he's considered one of the top players. Frankly, he's the top player this year because he won the MVP. So,
and it's been a minute since an American player has won NBA MVP, because Gilgeous-Alexander is Canadian. Joel Embiid won the MVP recently. Is he Cameroonian?
Yes, he's from Cameroon.
Cameroonian, of course. Giannis Antetokounmpo is from Greece. Jokic is from Serbia, right? So it's been an international flavor.
It's been since
MVP.
2017
was the last American MVP.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
I didn't realize it was that.
That was Steph, wasn't it? Was
James
it Harden?
Harden.
Wow, I didn't know that either. But then you look at these guys and you wonder, because you brought up face of the NBA, and you would automatically think that Giannis, he would be a face. Jokic, he would be a face. Shea Gilgeous, he could be the face. But I think the NBA, for whatever reason, they would rather have the face of the NBA as an American-born player rather than, a player that is great but from another country. I think they would rather. That's why it was LeBron. That's why it was Steph. That's why, even Giannis, as good as he's been, nobody considers him the face of the NBA. They just don't. Jokic, the same way. As good as he's, yeah, 20. Jokic is the same way, but nobody consider those guys faces of the NBA. I think a lot of it has to do, they want to promote a American-born, great player. And
wouldn't you say too that commercial with the three guys from the OKC, that plays about as often? I'm tired of it. Right? It's like, mix it up. Let's get some new.
What a Pro Wants, is that the one? That was last year.
Well, that was the first one. Now there's the one where they all show up at the event and they're wearing the same 20 outfits, and they're like, wait a minute, that didn't you get?
Well, they got to show it now. They got to show it now.
Well, that's the thing, though. But that has been playing for every sporting event that I can think of. Baseball games, hockey games, basketball games. Obviously, it plays all the time. But I'll bet you there's a lot of people that are watching that don't know that that's the MVP of the NBA.
I'm sure. I am sure.
But this is the stage where I think it changes, where all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what SGA is that what his kind of slang nickname is? I still think that's catching on, but once it gets to a point at a certain time, right, where it's just Steph, it's just LeBron. Obviously, LeBron was early. Steph was pretty early, but it takes a couple years for it to marinate, where you just become a one letter guy, Madonna kind of thing.
But
right?
I guarantee you, Willie, and this goes to what I'm saying. I guarantee you, Willie, that more people know about the Ant-Man than they do SGA. And the Ant-Man hasn't even won the MVP.
And Anthony Edwards has said that he doesn't want to be the face of the NBA.
The NBA wants him to be the
face.
But
he doesn't want to be.
But he doesn't. He's Jordan-esque. He's an American-born player. They want him to be the face, but he's not ready for it. He doesn't want it.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the Stanley Cup final, the NBA finals, 615-737-1025. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. George Plaster will join us coming up next for our weekly conversation. But actually, before we get to that, I have a text to read from my wife. She says, "We listened to you in the car, and Arlo said that Derek is bad and Willie is good and Daddy is bad." So, Willie, cheers to you, my friend. Derek is bad.
Welcome to the dad zone of nothing Dad says can be good.
Why are we bad?
It goes in and out of phases.
Derek is bad and Willie is good and Daddy is bad.
Why are you and I bad? What did we say?
Arlo, we're going to have a talk when we get home, bud. 615-737.
Very smart young man.
615-737-1025. Tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight as the Nashville Sounds take on Gwinnett at First Horizon Park. Pregame begins at 6:20 and the first pitch is at 6:35. Coverage is also available on the Game Nashville app and at thegamenashville.com. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Bingen, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by the one and only George Plaster. Hello, George. How are you?
Adam, I'm good. How you doing?
We are doing well. So we are all now a few days removed from Vanderbilt losing in the Nashville Regional with a whimper. No better person, in my opinion, I think, to put this into a historical perspective than you, George. So what do you make of what happened at Vanderbilt over the weekend and this stretch of 4 consecutive years, no super regionals for the Vanderbilt Commodores?
Well, I know that that's getting a lot of discussion. And let me say up front that, like Willie, I'm a huge Tim Corbin fan. And this is unfortunate because I think it's taking away from the fact that he has reached the finals of the NCAA baseball tournament on 4 different occasions. And last time I checked, football's never played for a national title. Basketball's never been to a Final Four or played for a national title. So in the long history thing, Corbin's been nothing but a miracle worker. Now, that said, this kind of stat comes up because they have achieved at such a high level over the years. And, you know, what we saw last weekend was a complete meltdown. They looked really tight. I don't pretend to know what's causing that because I'm not around internally to have any clue what causes it. I know that their plate discipline in the game Sunday was absolutely pathetic. The guy that they put out there on the mound for Wright State, you know, I don't know that I've seen on the college level a guy throw that much slop and get away with it for that long. It was really pretty shocking. I guess the one thing that maybe helps Vandy a little bit is the fact that some others bit the dust as well. The Texases and Georgia and some others. So they're not the lone Mohican, but still it looks bad.
George Plaster is with us, and Plaza, you know, just trying to get through the aftermath of this. What has been the reaction on your show? Because I think I'm sensing from you, like for me, I get shocked when people start taking it to a level with Tim Corbin of something along the lines of, "Hey, is the game passing him by?" To me, that's the dumbest thing I've heard for a while. I've had conversations with you on your show about how, and we've had it here on our show a lot about how you have to change with the times, you have to adapt. I think it's pretty it's easily seen that he's doing that. But doesn't it surprise you when you have a little dip like this, how many people overreact?
I've been shocked by it, Willie. Sunday around me, I heard a ton of criticism of him. And look, I'm not saying he's perfect. He made a couple of questionable moves in the series that, you know, I kind of scratched my head about. The pitching Connor Fennell in the Louisville game seemed to be sort of I'm putting all my eggs in this basket kind of deal, and maybe you'd like to have a do-over. But again, I'm going to say it. This man's been to 4 different NCAA final rounds. In other words, there are 2 teams left, and his is one of them. Football's never sniffed that. Basketball's never sniffed that. Deep down, I don't think they ever will. And, you know, I think the criticism's got to be tempered a little bit by, wow, what this man has accomplished at this school is nothing short of miracle worker status. Now, you and I both know him better than probably most of the media. I think he puts an unbelievable amount of pressure on himself. I think he marches to the beat of a really high standard. And, I don't doubt that at times his players feel some of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that nobody hates losing more than Tim Corbin. And you've seen him, and I've seen him in the aftermath of those. He's got to sort of go to his corner, right, for a while and, sort of decompress. And it takes him a little while before he comes back swinging. But, and George, I think you can talk about years ago. We learned this pretty early about him. And it's what really makes him great, right? It's what separates him from a lot of people, his dedication to the whole thing.
Oh my goodness. The sort of the concept of leave no stone unturned. I mean, that's Corbin in a nutshell.
Yeah. Maybe you could tell the story where after that Michigan loss, right, in 2007, and they've won 2 national titles. Like you said, they've been to 4. They're 2 wins away from 4 national titles. But as you said, they've been to the finals 4 times. And this has all happened since the story that you're about to tell. But remember, you went to go see him just to say, hey, we've really enjoyed the ride. This is a program that hadn't done anything close to this. And I know you're disappointed. You kind of wanted to just kind of say, we appreciate what you're doing. And you saw him. He wasn't really responsive that day, was he?
No,
this was 2007, the David Price
I don't
team.
know that. Oh, I remember it well. I don't know that I'd ever seen anybody take a loss. And it was a shocking loss the night before because David Price had given up a 9th inning homer and Michigan won the deciding game 4-3. But Willie, you and I had gotten to know him, and you'll remember there was a day where I said to you before we really got to know him, there's something different about this guy. Mm-hmm. And, earlier that spring, he had come to me. We had gotten to talking about the possibility of hosting a regional, which Vanderbilt, I don't know that they had ever hosted one before. And he was worried about ticket sales and that kind of thing. And I told him that I would do whatever I could to help show-wise to push that. And, he's always remembered that. Well, after that loss, I went to see him the next day, and it was, on my end, just sort of a, hey, keep your head up. This thing's headed in the right direction. Don't get down in the dumps, because while last night sucked, this thing's headed in an upward trajectory. And, at that moment, he didn't want any part of it. And he takes losses probably harder than any coach I have ever seen.
All right, George, let's have a little fun here. This will be under the category of this is not your first rodeo. This is a line you like to use. True?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can remember the early days of, and I would really say, honestly, that you were a pioneer in sort of introducing and letting the market of Nashville know the NFL is a big thing, even though it may not seem like it. There's that whole nebulous, hey, they're in Memphis. Hey, or first it was like, hey, are they really coming from Houston? Yes, they're coming from Houston. Oh, well, they're playing in Memphis. Oh, now they're playing at Vanderbilt. It just didn't seem very big time for a while, but you were always at the forefront of covering the team. So you remember these days, the first few years especially, but even the first 6 or 8 years, getting the whole concept of OTAs and all these practices and workouts in the offseason where you would hear all these hyped up guys that Jeff Fisher would say, boy, we really like this guy. He's going to be really good. Or the media would latch on to a guy who was making all these plays. And we kind of had to learn to sift through the hype. And it's amazing how it still happens today because of now it's just such a rabid following. Everybody wants Titans news every day if they can get it. But you were kind of on the uphill climb. So you remember some of these days where we started hearing about these guys.
So the one that I used to make the most fun of, and Derek will get a good laugh over this, I used to say that there were 3 things in life that were certainties: death, taxes, and David Fluellen will lead the Titans in rushing in August. Every time you turned around, it was David Fluellen this and David Fluellen that. And when the regular season would start, you never saw hide nor hair of him.
Yeah,
Here are a couple of Derek. Here are a couple of receivers that you need to make note of. Bashir Yamini.
Was that with you, D Mace? Was he with you?
I think he was.
Bashir Yamini. That
No,
is,
no. He was after. He was after me. No, he was after me. Mm-mm.
And don't forget the great Isaiah Mustafa.
Yeah, I see him. Yeah, I remember a receiver. Yes, he does movies now.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, he does movies.
Something now.
Yes, he does movies now.
Have I seen
So
him in
he's
anything?
making more money than all of us.
Yeah, he plays in Tyler Perry movies.
Oh,
He's the. If I'm thinking of the right, he's the guy on the commercials, the Old Spice commercials.
really?
That's
Yes.
Isaiah Mustafa.
Yes.
That cannot be the same guy.
Yes,
There's no way that
I
guy
think-
was in the Titans uniform. Really?
Yeah, the receiver. Yeah.
Okay, we've got to
Wow,
research
that's pretty
this.
good.
Because that's a lot of
He
commercials.
absolutely was.
Yeah, it's the same guy.
He was an off-season
Yes.
and/or practice squad member for the Tennessee Oilers in 1997 and
When I-
1998.
No
The first time I saw him on screen, I said, I know that dude. I said, I know that dude. And it turned out to be, I sent him a quick text, and it turned out to be Isaiah.
Yeah, he's definitely doing better than all of us, George. He is absolutely doing
There
better
is
than
no
all of us.
question.
He smells better than all of us, and his bank account is fatter than
He's
all of ours.
probably
I
on
like
some
his
show
latest
in
one.
Hollywood ripping us.
Exactly.
Oh, no question. The latest one is one of my favorites. He's got that interaction with the woman that they're always arguing over whose Old Spice is it,
Mm-hmm.
and he's on the exercise bike. You always hear about this antiperspirant. It's not deodorant; it's just antiperspirant. He goes, "I smell like perspirant."
So that's him?
That's him.
Indeed.
That's Isaiah Mustafa.
Isaiah
I didn't know
Mustafa.
that.
Oh, my God.
Just look the name up, George. Just look the name up.
We all learned
And he's
something
played in
today.
movies. He's the Old Spice. He had the Old Spice commercials. So
Wow, we learned something today.
and other commercials too.
I'm on the throwback to Hale Stadium. Just getting we're all standing there on the sideline, learning all these guys. Right? You're like, this is the NFL, and of course, it was still such a work in progress. But you get a feel for how to cover a camp. Like none of us here that had been here knew how to cover a camp, and so we sort of learned on the fly. And so you had to learn everybody in the roster. And one of them was Isaiah.
According to Wikipedia, the Oilers signed him to the practice squad, then sent him to NFL Europe's Barcelona Dragons
He went to
in
Barcelona.
1998.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget the backup quarterback, James Ritchie.
Ooh.
Oh yeah,
Ah.
he didn't last very long.
How
And
about
who was
how about George McCullough
Oh, my goodness. I hadn't thought of that one in a while.
or Danon Sidney?
Danon Sidney. Now, Danon Sidney, compared to this group, is a rock star.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. He had some
Who
good
was
moments.
the,
Danon said.
Who was the tight end who was a special teams guy right at the beginning from A&M, Willie?
Oh, you talking about Rod? Not Rod. He was Rod wasn't from A&M.
Oh, I know you're talking about. Yeah, it was Rod. Wasn't it
Rod Lewis?
Rod
No.
Lewis.
It wasn't Rod Lewis. From A&M back when we first got here?
Yeah.
It had to be Rod Lewis.
Rod Lewis played for
No.
Tennessee in 1997.
That's not the one.
Well, we got
It was a white guy who was a tight end, but really was more a special teams guy.
Not Mike Roan.
Not Roner.
No, Roner.
Roner has
Roner.
a unique
Roner.
history as well.
Roner.
He wasn't
was
ever
the
hyped
one-
up.
No, but he was Frank's running buddy.
Yes.
And when we decided that there was going to be a Frank Wycheck show, Frank sort of tossed out this thing that there would be a segment called Roan's Rumors. And I'll never forget the day he said that. I don't know where we were, but Roner turned to me and he goes, if Frank thinks I'm coming out there every week for a sandwich, he's got another thing coming.
Right. There wasn't a plan in the budget to pay Mike to be the sidekick on the show.
There was no budget.
There was no budget.
No, none.
George, always a pleasure. We will pick up this conversation on the other side, but we're glad that you helped us kick it off.
Bashir Yamini says hello.
We say hello back.
There.
Thank you, George.
See you. Bye-bye.
All right, so we teased it there. I will introduce the segment coming up next because, as Willie mentioned, it's the middle of the summer. We have little football to discuss in terms of what's actually happening at OTAs. So we are going to introduce the Tennessee Titans offseason all-stars. And when I say all-stars, I'm using finger quotes. And I'll explain that coming up next. We want your participation as well. 615-737-1025. Derek Mason, Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063 The Game. Don't miss out on Nashville's best deals. Great offers for 312 Pizza, Beach Bend Amusement Park and Splash Lagoon Water Park, Central Barbecue, Fog Street Lawn Club, and more. Get them now while supplies last at theGameNashville.com/deals. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. A couple of texts from Eric. It says, hey, Willie, Dion Cole is the Old Spice guy arguing with his wife in the current commercials. Isaiah did the earlier commercials. So
Isaiah's on a horse.
Multiple.
Oh, Isaiah Mustafa's on the horse.
Yes.
Okay, different guy. All right, so there's two guys. All right.
And then Adam in Portland says, James McKeehan was that spectacular tight end you guys were thinking of. The tight end that George was trying to remember his name.
Okay.
So
we were having fun with kind of some just obscure guys. I mean, he was going very obscure.
Yes.
Right. But we're going to try to streamline this target to a little bit of a slightly different category.
Yes.
Right.
So
of guys who are the heroes of the offseason,
right,
that are built up and get talked about on shows like ours, shows like George and I did for all those years, going all the way back to the first season. But you kind of learn over time that these guys don't always pan out.
Absolutely. So I'm referring to them as the Titans offseason, in quotes, all-stars. Players who were hyped up in the offseason who amounted to absolutely nothing when it mattered for the Tennessee Titans. Because, look, it's the middle of June, or actually it's the beginning of June, but OTAs are here. Mandatory minicamp is next week. Then we have that long 6-7 week stretch until training camp starts. And we are guilty of it on this station, on this show. Did you hear what Calvin Ridley said about Cam Ward? Did you hear what Brian Callahan said about Cam Ward? Did you hear what Cam Ward said about Cam Ward? And it's usually the same trite stuff you hear every year. I'm in the best shape of my life. Derek Mason, how many times in interviews every summer did you say that you were in the best shape of your life?
I guess whenever somebody asks that question.
You never said, man, I really let myself go this summer. I don't know how good I'm going to be for this team. So this is what I want all of you to do. At 615-737-1025, our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I want you to share with us the players who were hyped up in the offseason for the Tennessee Titans, who amounted to absolutely nothing, ultimately. Which players fooled you? I'll give you an example. I mentioned this yesterday. Chigakonkwo, after his rookie season, in a limited role, he was efficient, and I bought into the hype. Now, he's still on the team, and I do think that a lot of the players that we're going to discuss barely hung on with the team, let alone hung on in the NFL. But I bought into the Chigakonkwo hype a couple of years ago, and that has not panned out. I will also share with you, Willie and Derek, who I believe this year's candidate is going to be. I can already tell who it's going to be. Xavier Restrepo. It's absolutely Xavier Restrepo, an undrafted free agent. The history with Cam Ward. Remember how excited Titans fans were when the Titans signed him after the draft. The hype is already off the charts for Xavier Restrepo. And I think there's a non-zero chance that he doesn't make the team. Willie,
I have, and you and I are both, I think you and I are both guilty of this one. And this may end up being a huge one. Dorial Green Beckham.
Oh my God.
Yes.
It's so amazing you just brought that up.
Yes.
5 minutes ago, I asked Mahoney during this break. Mahoney, I'm doing the show from home today. Mahoney Donick, lifelong Titans fans, growing up. It's in his blood. I asked him for two names, and that was one of them.
Man. He may go down as the all-time.
Oh, he might be the all-time. And D-Mace, you used to talk about him so much.
Oh my goodness! I pumped his tires.
You pumped his tires. Like, he just got to lose a little weight. He's going to get there. And Dorial Green Beckham at one point was the #1 recruit in America.
Man,
at wide receiver at Missouri. All this talent. And then drafted maybe in the second round?
He was the 40th overall pick.
Yeah.
Second round in the 2015 draft. He played 16 games for the Titans, started 5 games, 32 catches, 549 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Man.
He went to Philadelphia, right, in the trade for Dennis Kelly.
Yeah.
Played
And
that
I thought at
year.
the time, I was like, what the heck? Are they just Dennis Kelly? That ended up being a really good trade for John Robinson.
Yeah.
Played that year in Philadelphia, and that was it. He was out of the league after 2 seasons.
Yeah, I was so high on that kid, man. Gosh. Never did work out.
But Dorial Green Beckham is the perfect example of someone in the offseason. We're like, oh my God, did you see Dorial Green Beckham in 7-on-7s? That guy's going to be a star. And you saw what happened. So 615-737-1025. Which player fooled you? Which player hyped up in the offseason by the Tennessee Titans, by, frankly, those of us sitting in these chairs? Which player fooled you? Which player who was hyped up in the offseason that amounted to absolutely nothing were you fooled by? And we all have our choices, and we are going to share them with you coming up next. 615-737-1025. Derek Mason, Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. All right, it's time for our Tennessee Titans offseason, quote-unquote, all-stars. Players who were hyped up in the offseason and amounted to absolutely nothing. For the Tennessee Titans, the text line is already flooded with suggestions and submissions, and we will get to them. You can call us. You can text us 615-737-1025. And gentlemen, if you don't mind, I would like to submit my first candidate for the Tennessee Titans, quote-unquote, all-star list. And this one is near and dear to my heart because we share a hometown, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And that guy is Justin Hunter. Justin Hunter is my first submission for the Tennessee Titans offseason all-stars. He was drafted in the second round, number 34 overall in 2013. And gentlemen, there is something about Justin Hunter that multiplies the hype surrounding him to the nth degree. What is it?
They traded up to get him, number one.
There's
he
that.
Played at the University of Tennessee.
Bingo.
Ball for life.
Bingo. He went to Tennessee.
UFL.
If you go to Tennessee and you play for the Tennessee Titans, that multiplies the hype to the absolute extreme. So Justin Hunter, by the way, in his final season with the Volunteers, 73 catches, 1,083 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Over 3 seasons with the Titans, 13 starts in 35 games, a total of 1,116 yards over 3 seasons. He also, leading to the hype, ran a 4.44 at the Combine. So Justin Hunter is my first submission to the Tennessee Titans offseason, quote-unquote, all-stars. I also do have a somewhat humorous story as it relates to Justin Hunter. So July 2015, you may remember that Hunter was arrested and charged with felonious assault in Virginia Beach for a fight that he had at a bar near the beach. And I happened to be on vacation. I had just moved to Nashville. I had been,
Don't tell me
I had just moved to Nashville. I had been living there for 3-4 months, but I took a week off from the Tennessean and went home to Virginia Beach. And just as I was getting ready to go home, I get a call from my editor saying, "Hey, can you stay in Virginia Beach and report out this story about Justin Hunter being arrested?" And I was just like, Justin Hunter's not that good. Why do we care? But I ended up having to go to the bar and interview people at the bar. And I requested security cam footage from the city of Virginia Beach. And ultimately, the charge was reduced, and then he was found not guilty. And then he was cut, or he was traded. I don't remember which one it was. But Justin Hunter, absolutely my first submission. Your thoughts on Justin Hunter on this list, Derek Mason?
I think they also had soured on him by then too.
Yeah.
And I remember a story. It was Van Jefferson's dad. I forget what was the wide receivers coach. Van Jefferson's dad. John Jefferson. He was a really good receiver in the NFL for a long time. I believe, if I've got the details right, I may be off a little bit, but Sean Jefferson had the equipment guys, and you know them all real well, D-Base. They had him. They put on the back of his jersey, instead of Hunter, it said Jag, J-A-G, because he was trying to motivate him and say, you know what, you're just a guy, J-A-G.
Just another guy.
You're just another guy, just a guy. You got to work harder. You got to be better, and you're not there. And, I know you were, Mr. Special. Everybody was special. It was that message, right? There was a whole article or two written about that, and it was like, oh boy, the hype is starting to get a little too much here for the production.
Yeah, I just think Justin Hunter, I wasn't high on him when he came out of college. A lot of people were, because he was 6'3", 6'4", ran a 4.43 or 4.4.
It was a 4.44.
Yeah,
I looked it up last night.
Flat. I mean, he could jump out the gym. But to me, he never was a well-rounded wide receiver, so I wasn't that high on him. But here's a name. Here's another name in the wide receiver category, and it seems like we just keep talking about wide receivers. But Racey McMath,
That is so
Racy
good.
McMahon.
Now, to be fair, wide receivers, no disrespect, Derek, wide receivers are prone to be hyped up quite a bit.
I get it.
No
But, man,
question.
he was a 6th-round draft pick. I know he came from LSU, and this is all the while you have Jefferson, Chase, all those guys coming out, and Racy McMahon he's just another guy in a long line of really good receivers that have come out of LSU, and he just never. There was so much. He just never amounted to anything.
That's a great one.
Willie,
there is
go ahead.
something about the wide receivers because there's a lot of them.
Yes.
You're watching them a lot at these practices because they throw a lot of passes at practice. You're watching to see who catches it. And in those off-season practices or the training camp practices, you can have a few days you look really good. And because of the thirst, I would say, to find wide receivers who are homegrown, developed, drafted by the Titans who produce, there's such a short list. So I think if that all combined, you've got the long list. I'll give you one from my annals that I selected. Yesterday we mentioned Paul Williams and Mike Williams, who were not brothers, not related at all, but they were Mike Reinfeldt, who was the successor to Floyd Reese. He would talk about these guys every week on the show. Oh, yeah, they're doing great. We're like, well, when the season starts, where are they? They're not even in the lineup. They're the healthy scratches, those kind of things. But here's one in the category of they thought they had a sleeper. 4th-round pick the 2008 draft, Lavelle Hawkins from California, University of California.
Yes, Lavelle Hawkins.
Every year. And he was with the team for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
In his first 3 years, he caught 19 passes combined. But I swear, for 3 years,
yeah,
it was that guy. Lavelle Hawkins, he's right on the cusp. Yeah. He's doing it. He's going to really explode. He's got the tools. He had a great personality. He was a hard worker.
Oh, he was a good kid. He worked hard and everything.
Yeah.
It just never worked out. Yeah.
Taywan
Taylor.
Taywan Taylor is another good.
Taylor, from Western Kentucky.
We could do this entire segment on receivers.
Yes.
Wes,
I will drop in one running back because I want to get Mahoney some credit on this because he nailed. I hadn't thought of this guy in a few years, but this will resonate. Darrington Evans.
Yeah.
Running back. Another guy that they thought was the perfect complement. I think when Derrick Henry's around, I've lost track.
Out of Appalachian State, if I recall correctly.
And a pretty high pick, right? What year was that? Let's see.
Darrington Evans was drafted in the 3rd round in 2020, 93rd overall.
Whew, that's high.
He barely got on the field.
He played 6 games for the Titans. He appeared in 6 games over 2 seasons.
You heard all about him, but he never got on the field. We mentioned Bishop Sankey yesterday. I think he would be Bishop Sankey at least got on the field a little bit more.
We'll get back to Bishop Sankey in a second. But Wes from Hermitage on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, wants in on this. Wes, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
All right, guys. There's no pickles today.
Thankfully.
So that's good. I'm going to go feather ruffling today. I'm going to make some people mad with what I say. And y'all may not agree with me, and I stand on this. L'Jarius Sneed.
That is an interesting one. Thank you, Wes. That is an interesting one just because of, for me.
But he had done it. Like he had been, he had established himself as a high level player.
I understand where Wes is coming from.
He's missed expectations. Yes. I totally get that.
Yes. I understand where Wes is coming from. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about players who hadn't backed it up the way that L'Jarius Sneed did in Kansas City. I know it has not worked out here at all, but I'm thinking more of players who came in with this tremendous amount of hype who hadn't proven it at the NFL level yet. They were usually rookies or second-year players. So you mentioned Bishop Sankey. Bishop Sankey was my second submission for this. Bishop Sankey drafted in the 2nd round, number 54 overall in 2014. By the way, the first running back selected in the 2014 NFL draft, which was a record weight for running backs. I'm not sure if that still holds. It's been more than 10 years. But at the time, that was the longest a running back had gone before being selected in the NFL draft. Get these numbers from his final season at Washington. He ran for 1,870 yards and 20 touchdowns at Washington his junior season. And remember, that was the summer that the Titans moved on from Chris Johnson. So people thought, hey, Bishop Sankey, big time player, he can fill in for Chris Johnson. Did not happen. Bishop Sankey in his career, I got to pull up his career numbers here. They were not impressive. I just remember at one point when I was at the Tennessean writing a story about Bishop Sankey, like, is this his last chance? And indeed it was. In two years, he started 12 games. He played 30. He played 29, started 12. He ran for a total of 762 yards and 3 touchdowns over 2 seasons. And he never made an impact for any other team. I think he may have floated around the league, maybe been on some practice squads. But in terms of actual on-the-field statistics, 2014, 2015 with the Titans, that's it. Never heard from again. Bishop Sankey.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. That is a good one. Let's see what our listeners have to say.
I really
because
want
I can go down this list.
We can keep going.
Here is one that has appeared.
There's this theme, right, that happens at this time of the year. The media people too, the people who write the article of, hey, keep your eye on so and so. It's the beat writers, they got to come up with stuff, right? So and then the sports talk show hosts, like all of us, we want to be able to say, I told you about Lavelle Hawkins. I told you he was on the verge of greatness, and I was the first one to tell you, right? And we're wrong more than we're right.
All right, so a popular choice on the text line is Tyrone Calico.
Wow. Okay, we touched on him yesterday. But you have mixed feelings about that.
Yes, I do, because Tyrone, he was raw coming out of MTSU. Hell of an athlete, can run, jump, everything.
From Millington Central High School.
Yeah, so he still had a lot that was there. And he started to show it. Now, he started to develop, his hands started to develop more because he used to drop a lot of balls early on in practice. And he started to get better, but not to a point where, we counted on him to he was more like a 50-50 catcher. But when he would get the ball in his hands, I mean, this kid was outstanding. He got hurt against the Chargers.
I think it was Dallas. I think it was Dallas because there was something
it Dallas
about that. Because here's what I remember, D-Mace. You tell me if this is right.
I know he was running toward outside the sideline, and they grabbed him by the basically horse collar.
Yes, and that's what I was going to say. I think it was Roy Williams of Dallas. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm visualizing it because Roy Williams did the horse collar, and Tyrone Calico was never the same. But
it was Roy Williams.
There was no such thing as the horse collar by rule. So I think he was one of on the forefront of creating the horse collar penalty. Unfortunately for Tyrone.
So I don't see Tyrone because I think he would have been a good receiver in this league. And I think he had knee problems anyway when he came out of college. I think he had a knee surgery or something, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But he did seem like he would be a guy that would be able to mature and develop into a good receiver. But he ended up getting hurt. So it's hard for me to say Tyrone Calico. Man, it's hard for me to put him in that box.
What about Kenny Britt?
No, because Kenny Britt he should have gave you more. You hoped he would have given you more. He did give you something, but you were just hoping for more with Kenny Britt.
Willie, I know you have some other ones. We discussed this yesterday. Who are some of your other submissions for the Tennessee Titans, quote unquote, offseason All-Stars?
Well, I wanted to leave it for some other. I want to hear some from the others.
Okay.
615-737-1025. The couple that I mentioned yesterday, the Williams brothers, I don't think I can emphasize enough. Mike Williams especially was. Paul Williams was an unknown guy that none of us had ever heard of in college, but we just kept hearing his name. Hey, this guy's awesome in practice. You watch. In a couple years, we're going to develop this guy. And I don't know if he ever got on the field for a regular season game. Mike Williams was different. Mike Williams was a star at USC. And there were a lot of articles written. He might be the poster child of the absolute story of the offseason who did zero in the regular season. I don't know if you guys wasn't there something I'm trying to jar my memory. He challenged the NCAA on something, being able to go pro before he was eligible. I think he wanted to go pro after his freshman year or something like that. You can maybe look this up, Adam. Mike Williams, USC. But because didn't Claret try to do this? Was around the same time where they were sort of challenging
Maurice
that you had to
Claret,
stay
yep.
3 years in college. Why do I have to stay 3 years in college? I'm ready. Mike Williams, I think, was that guy. And people in the league were like, good luck, buddy, but maybe you should stay a little longer. You may not be that good. And then by the time he got to the Titans, he was just looking for a job, but he was trying to revive his stock. And they thought they had something, right? But it did not happen.
One other, so we just received back-to-back texts for Dorial Green Beckham, who we have already covered, but Dorial Green Beckham is an excellent choice. Here is another popular choice: running back Chris Henry.
See, I wasn't here.
Chris Henry, a huge, great
drafted
answer.
Chris Henry. I wasn't here, so Willie could speak on
Willie
that
can
more.
speak on that because Derek and I were not here for that.
That was another guy. I forget what year that was. That might have been a Mike Reinfeld era, post Floyd Reese.
That was 07.
Yes, that was right after Floyd Reese, and they thought he was a second-round pick.
Yep,
he
50th
was
overall in 2007.
He was a classic guy that in the workouts, in shorts, right, in the combine, he was a master. He graded extremely high in those things. But when it came time for the game, he didn't have the vision. Like, he had all the tools. He had the speed, he had all the strength and everything, but he just didn't have the feel in the game. And so he never did anything. But he was the most impressive guy in shorts in a t-shirt that the Titans had. Like, tons of hype for sure.
615
workout warrior.
615-737-1025. Excellent submission so far. We encourage your participation for our Tennessee Titans offseason quote-unquote all-stars list. Who are the players who were hyped up in the offseason and amounted to absolutely nothing for the Tennessee Titans? Who fooled you? Because we've all been fooled. 615-737-1025. We will get back to your reaction coming up next. But before we do, the PFL World Championship semifinals are Thursday, June 12th at Municipal Auditorium, and you can be there. Text in the keyword match, MATCH, to 615-737-1025 now to be entered to win a pair of VIP ringside tickets. Visit pflmma.com/schedule for more details. D. Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, continuing our conversation. Tennessee Titans offseason, quote unquote, all-stars. Players who were hyped up in the offseason and amounted to absolutely nothing for the Tennessee Titans. A lot of submissions on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. I thought this one was funny from an unnamed texter. Tyrone Calico, the original Lavelle Hawkins.
Hey, Willie, how about Cody Sisaba? Oh, Willie's not there? Okay. How about Cody Sensabaugh?
I don't remember.
You don't remember Cody. It was
No.
2000, I think it was 2012. Yeah, he was defensive back out of Clemson, and it just, he had all the measurables that you would want. And you would be hyped about him during the preseason, and then he get into the season and you don't see anything from him. I think he ended up starting a few games for the Titans. This first couple years now, 15, he started every game but one. And he just didn't, it wasn't enough to keep him here in Nashville. So I think every year it was like, oh, Cody Sisaba, and he never amounted to what they wanted him to.
Matthew at Nashville says Sean Green,
The
running back. Now, he had a
yes.
couple of 1,000-yard seasons with the New York Jets before signing with the Titans, but he amounted to nothing with the Titans in 2 seasons, a total of 687 rushing yards over 2 seasons with the Tennessee Titans. See, that one's on the borderline because, like the caller who mentioned L'Jarius Sneed, at least Sean Green had some proof of concept. He did run for 1,000 yards twice in the NFL. Again, like, everybody can do this differently. I'm thinking more of players who were younger, who were drafted high, who came in with a lot of hype. Again, my submissions were Justin Hunter and Bishop Sankey, both of whom were second-round picks. Bishop Sankey thought to be the successor to Chris Johnson. Justin Hunter, as I said, went to Tennessee. So that multiplies the hype by 1,000,000. And neither of them panned out. One texter says Adoree Jackson. I think Adoree Jackson is a solid submission.
Yeah, it all depends on, I mean, his career here was up and down, more down than up. I thought he never reached, at least the guy that I saw in college. This guy was playing, he was returning punts, kickoffs. I mean, he was the best DB they had, one of the best in the country. I mean, this dude he was doing things that you just thought would translate to the NFL. And when he got here, it was just he never was able to catch on ever. So, and he played a lot, but he just never was what everyone thought he would be.
One texter says Eddie Berlin.
Okay. In what sense?
This was before my time.
Yeah, because Eddie Berlin, I think, was a 5th round pick, maybe. I think he was a 5th round pick, if I'm not sure. Either 2nd, 4th round pick, or
Eddie Berlin was
a
a 5th round pick in 2001.
Yeah, so it wasn't, because people were looking more so at Justin McCarron, who also came in that class, and he was drafted a round before Eddie. They were looking at him more so than Eddie Berlin. I think Eddie was, once I stopped doing punt return, kickoff return duty, Eddie Berlin was supposed to be that guy. And it never, I mean, he fumbled a few times, and it just never, he could never really grab hold of that return position the way they wanted him to. So, but if you're talking about a receiver, no, I always thought they had Justin McCarron before him, and Justin played well.
Willie, Derek suggested Cody Sensabaugh while you were away. Your thoughts on Cody Sensabaugh?
I had not thought of that name in a long time. But Eddie Berlin and another guy named Jake Schifino were also in that category of mid-round picks that there was a lot of optimism for.
There was a lot of optimism for Jake Schifino.
A lot of optimism. And you're like, really? Like, neither one of those guys were household names in college. Not like a Justin Hunter, right, who everybody around here saw. They were like, oh, here's a name I haven't heard. That man, people are talking about this guy. What are we going to see? And it just never panned out. Shafino, you can speak to this, D-Base. He had a lot of injury problems too.
Yeah, he just can never. I mean, you would see him in practice and camp. This dude, I mean, he caught everything. He had some of the best set of hands I had seen. He caught everything. He knew how to run routes. He knew how to manipulate DBs. He just could never put it all together on the field when he had to. And then he ended up getting hurt all the time. Something was always nagging him. Something was always wrong with him. But he had talent and everybody saw it. So I think that's why everybody was so high on him.
Another popular submission, and this one may hit a little hard. Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks may be the perfect example of this, just because he was a first-round pick. He was a first-round pick acquired for A.J. Brown. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. When he has been on the field, he hasn't been impactful. I think Treylon Burks, we'll see how long he stays on the Tennessee Titans, but if and when that day comes, when Burks is no longer on the team, I think he may be a first-team Tennessee Titans offseason all-star. Although, I do remember looking at a lot of pollen reports a couple of years ago.
Oh, yes.
Is his asthma going to kick in? What's the asthma like in Nashville versus in Arkansas?
I think there are several chapters to the Treylon Burks, and unfortunately, I think we're getting to the last chapter of the book, which is not a happy ending. But of course, the very first chapter is this is the guy they got for AJ, right?
Yes.
That's the title of the book. The guy we got for AJ, and it's a sad story. But so the offseason hype was first. Hey, let's see what this guy is. Hey, they drafted this guy. This is the guy we got for AJ. And he can't get on the field because of the pollen and the asthma that was one section. And the next section, I think what really hits the groove of this topic was his off season between his first year and his second year.
Yes.
Because that's when you really started here. Man, this guy's catching everything. Man, this guy he's ready now. It's going to happen. He's learned what he's got to do. The asthma's behind him. And now we know what happened.
There was the story.
Down.
There was the story that Paul Kaharski reported about how his flight was going to be canceled to practice or training camp. I can't remember which time of the year it was.
I'm a crop duster.
And he took the prop plane. He found someone who could fly him personally to Nashville.
Dedicated. He was dedicated, man. But again, like Jake Shafino, injuries. It seems like injuries is going to be a big part of why Treylon hasn't been able to, reach whatever potential they thought he had. Because, you saw flashes of it and then he goes down. You see another flash, then he goes down. Then he's gone, period. So, yeah, he may end up being the captain of the All-Star team.
I actually do have a couple of submissions for captain on our text line. One texter says, Chance Warmack.
I was just thinking Chance Warmack. Oh, my goodness.
And he was a great personality.
Yeah, he was a
he
good
did
person.
all the radio interviews. Such an engaging guy to talk to. And you rooted for him. Remember, he used to make fun of his beer belly. The line. He used to let it hang out during practice. You just thought, hey, this is a great personality. He's going to make it. And, man.
10th overall pick.
Yes.
Alabama.
Mike Munchak special, right? Mike Munchak was the offensive line coach when D. Mace was playing. He had ascended to head coaching. He was famous for picking out the later round picks, like the Michael Roos and the Big Country Stewart, right? He had an eye. And he's like, finally, I get to draft an offensive lineman in the first round. And this is my guy. And it just did not go well.
Yeah, he played 68 games in his career. He started 3 full seasons for the Titans. He missed 2 games due to injury in 2015. But prior to that, he played all of 13, all of 14, missed 2 games to 16. And then, 15 and then 16, he only played 2 games with the Titans. I think he may have gotten injured that year too, because the next following year he was in Philly. So,
Super Bowl champion Chance Warmack. Who did he win a Super Bowl with?
Philly.
Yeah,
he won it in 2017 or 18, whenever they won it. that year.
Another popular submission, but actually, before we get to those, the other candidate for captain, Kevin Dodd, on our text line.
Ooh, yes.
Ooh.
Yes.
There's
Out of
another guy.
Clemson, early
Yes.
second round
Second
pick.
rounder.
Same second round as Derrick Henry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Didn't show up to OTAs, made Mike Vrabel mad.
Kevin Dodd.
As Darren McFarland used to call him all the time, Kevin Dud.
Clever. Very clever.
Wow. Some names, man. I don't know if that's good or bad for this organization, that we are just coming up with all these names.
I bet if you went to any other market
I'm
and they
sure
did
it'd be
the
the
same
same.
They have the same
exercise,
guys.
I'm sure
it's
it's
everywhere.
it's
Yes,
everywhere.
The thirst of the NFL. It's the hope of the offseason.
Yes.
Yeah, our team is going to have a couple of guys that you've never heard of
Mhm.
that are going to become stars.
I mean, I'll tell you, as I said, I think that this year's candidate is Xavier Restrepo.
Mm.
Remember, I warned all of you, don't get sucked into the slickly produced 10-second videos that the Titans are going to put out there. And then during rookie minicamp, there was the pass from Cam Ward, slow motion spiral right to Xavier Restrepo in stride, and a Titans fan quote tweeted it, and I don't know if he was joking or not. I'm going to assume he wasn't. Xavier Restrepo, 1,000-yard season incoming, based off of that 10-second video.
I love it.
Restrepo it's absolutely
Incoming.
going to be Restrepo. Okay, a couple from Matthew in Nashville: Antonio Andrews and Darius Renaud.
Darius Renaud.
Raynaud, yeah, and he had a couple of moments. He had a couple of flashes. He was
their returner, right?
He was a return man.
Uh-huh.
And he had a couple of big ones, but
Yes,
he
he
also
did.
had, I think, the very first game. This is another jogging the memory. I think I've got this right. He was the return man, and maybe it was the first one of the year. If it wasn't, it was the second. It was against the Steelers, and they won the game. But he bobbled the first kickoff, and they got a safety.
That's not a good way to start a season.
Not a good way to start the season. He was very much feast or famine.
Yeah.
He did have a couple of big returns. He was pretty good. But yeah, I remember I was the hype guy on him. I was like, he's really good. Man, he looks good. Like the preseason games, he looked really, really talented.
One other submission from me. He is still on the team, and I imagine he'll be a preseason All-Star again this season. Julius Chestnut. There was one year where Julius Chestnut, I want to say, led the league in the preseason in rushing yards. He averaged 6 yards. He averaged 6 rushing yards. Is that 6 yards a carry? If I'm reading this right.
Probably. I think he busted some big ones in those games.
But is it his fault that?
It's not. No,
yeah,
it's
it's
not
like you were running behind Derrick Henry at one point.
Yeah.
And then now he's sort of stuck as the third guy.
Yeah.
Well, this is a slice. This is a slice of this category. And that would be running backs who get in the late parts of the preseason games, in the uniforms, the game's televised, and they come up with big yards against the other team's subs, right? They're D Mace and the starters they got the baseball hats on, the pads are off, they're not playing. And we're watching these games. We got to get through it. It's August. Everybody's excited for the season to start. So you're watching these games that don't mean anything. George mentioned David Fluellen, huge producer in preseason games. I would love to see the list of yards, the history of Titans preseason games, running back yards, right? Because those are the guys that have the records because they get the ball the most. So you got him, you got David Fluellen, you got Quinton Ganther was another one that would come in there. Mike, another teammate of yours, Mike Archie. Remember
Oh,
him?
yeah, I remember Mike. But Mike played
pretty good player.
a few years. Pretty good player. But he was stuck in, behind Eddie, and then it was Eddie and who was the backup when he first got here? Yeah, Rodney Thomas.
Rodney Thomas.
And then
Rodney
it was
Thomas.
Eddie, and they went and got the guy that played for Holcomb, Robert Holcomb.
Yeah. Now he was a pretty good backup guy.
Yes.
He was solid.
I have found a highlight of David Fluellen rushing for 53 yards in week 2 of the preseason.
Boom. Julius Chestnut is the current day David Fluellen.
Oh, man.
No doubt about it.
615-737-1025. We will continue to take your submissions on our Tennessee Titans offseason quote-unquote all-stars. Which players fooled you? which players who were so hyped up in the offseason, you were so excited about them, you were certain they were going to make an impact for the Tennessee Titans, and they amounted to absolutely nothing. 615-737-1025. Willie Dunnick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan with you. Matt from Bellevue is on our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com. He has a submission for our Titans offseason all-star quote-unquote list. Matt, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
What's up, fellas? What's up, D-Mace?
What's going on?
Hey, I got a dandy for you. What about the linebacker we drafted out of Alabama? Looked the part,
Yes.
absolute pedigree. I can't even remember his name. The guy I called in, he remembered it.
Rashad Evans.
Yeah, Rashad Evans.
Yeah.
Rashad Evans.
What
Another
and
great
that one hurt-
personality.
Oh, it hurt my heart because he looked the part.
Yeah, he spent what? 5?
Thank you for the call, Matt.
How many seasons he spent here?
I think he was one of those guys that they decided not to
3,
give
4
the fifth-year
seasons?
option to.
Yeah.
So four seasons.
Yeah.
Didn't give him the fifth,
Mm-hmm.
and they moved on. He was out there. They were waiting for the light to go on. He just never was great.
Yeah, he didn't miss. Well, the last season he played 12 games, started 11, but prior to that, 20. He played all 16 and started all 16. 19, the same. 18 is when he got drafted. He played in 15 games and started 7. So you just thought that, he would be able to develop into a really good linebacker, and it just didn't happen.
A popular submission on our text line, Willie, Ben Troop.
Ben Troop we mentioned yesterday, right?
Yes,
He was a guy. There was a season, and I don't remember the year. I want to say maybe 2003. D. Mace was there.
Mhm.
The Titans did not have a first-round pick. They had traded it, but they had a bunch of second-round picks, and Troop was one of the second-round picks. I think Travis LeBoy was one.
Troop was that 04 draft.
04. That's what it
Yeah.
was. 04. And
Yeah, I was with
Troop
Ben
could
a year.
flash. He could flash, right, and really look athletic.
Mhm.
And like, wow, this guy's got it. But he never could put it together on the field. I think Ben Troop is good. And Ben has become a sports talk show guy somewhere.
Yeah.
We've had him on our show a few
Mhm.
times. He's really good at what he does. I forget where he's based out of. It's been a few years since we've had him on.
Florida. It may be somewhere in Florida. But, I mean, you look at his rookie year, and because that was 04, and he did okay as a rookie. Started 7 games, played all 14. A lot of it was special teams too, but he was the second or third tight end. He had over 300 yards and a touchdown. So you just thought, okay, looking at that, you saw he had something in him. He had the talent. But then after that, the production got better the next following season, but then it just fell off a cliff.
Skylar on our text line says Chig's rookie year was so promising that his second season was a Hall of Fame bust level disappointment. I'm with you there, Skylar. I bought into the Chigaconquo hype. Chance Warmack again. Coy in Clarksville says Justin Hunter. He was one of my 2 submissions. Let's go to Austin on our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com. Austin, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, man, I don't know if you guys maybe discussed it. I kind of got late in on the discussion, but Kyle Phillips, oh, my God. When I seen the offseason.
Oh, that's a good
Kyle
one.
Phillips has been a popular choice.
Oh, listen, like the route running and everything, and then like the little one-on-ones they would do at the end of camp and stuff like that. I thought we had the next, what's his name, Cooper Kupp. Man, I was all the way bought in. And then the Giants, you remember the Giants game, he had like 6 catches in that game. Like he was getting open, but he just could never find the field because he was always hurt. But that's all I got.
Thanks, Austin.
And he got hurt in that game.
And he fumbled a lot
his
too,
career
right?
took a
he
different
fumbled
turn.
He fumbled a lot in the return game, if I recall
he
correctly.
fumbled too many times. They cost them big. So
yeah, Kyle Phillips was a popular suggestion. I mean, look, this is one we've had a couple of texts to this effect, and I don't think they're wrong. Will Levis is probably on this list too.
I thought about it too.
You can't help it if you're the quarterback.
Yeah, you look at what he did the previous season, you're like, okay, this is going to be great. And then,
we've covered that topic
that
at length.
Then that happens.
One texter, Taylor from Bellevue, says, I'm old enough to remember the Taywan Taylor hype. We've mentioned Taywan Taylor. He absolutely is a good choice. Adoree Jackson is another popular name that we've received.
Adoree Jackson. Yeah.
Adoree.
And I think Adoree Jackson is still in the NFL. So he's
not. Is he in Atlanta?
He was with the Giants for a while, wasn't he?
He played for the Giants for a long time.
Is he out west?
He was
So
with
he was not
okay.
a bust.
I was looking at
He
Tajuan
was
Taylor.
not a
Let me look
bust.
at Adoree Jackson.
I don't think Adoree Jackson was necessarily a
He's been with the
bust.
Giants for the past 4 seasons.
So he's still with them.
Yes, he was
Okay.
at least in 2024 he was.
Okay. I see
He's
him.
listed with the Eagles now.
Yeah,
So,
I think he's a solid defensive back, and I think he falls into the category of he was a first rounder.
Yes.
So there was an expectation level, especially because he came in. The hype was as a return man, and he had some bad moments as a return man for the Titans. He had a fumble in the rain on one of the gazillion Thursday night games against Jacksonville. You remember that one where they just had a nightmare, nothing went right, and eventually, just like last year with Jaquan Jackson,
Jaquan
Jackson, and then we just mentioned the same thing happened to Kyle Phillips. They kind of got fired as the return guy because they just couldn't trust him to catch the ball. Too many bad things were happening.
One texter says Bishop Sankey. He was on my list. Looks like Chase is in the studio.
Yes.
Chase has one for us.
Oh,
D-Mace, what about a guy that was drafted the same year as you, Joey Kent?
Oh, wow.
I have no recollection of Joey Kent.
Second round, right?
Yeah, no. Yeah, second round in the 97 draft. Even
beat out by Derek Mason.
Even being there and watching it all happen, I don't understand what happened, honestly. Even watching it, because it's not like, Joey was, he wasn't good in practice and it just, for whatever reason, it never happened. It was like he started off because they drafted him in the second round in 97. So they wanted him in the plans. And I think after that year, then they draft Dyson. I think he became the forgotten guy. Well, all of us really did, but he could never do anything to work his way back up, in front of everybody else for whatever. And then he wasn't a returner either. He wasn't a returner. And he played special teams. He played special teams, but I think he was a gunner and he was one of the guys on kickoff. But for some reason, it just never happened. Like, he didn't get injured. It just, for whatever reason, and I never understood. Nobody understood why.
The Titans, for some reason,
like Justin
have
Hunter,
had bad luck with second round pick wide receivers, except for one, and then they traded him.
Yeah.
Justin Hunter was my original submission, Chase.
I think there's a parallel between Kent and Justin Hunter, and Joey Kent was a hero for Tennessee, catching passes for Peyton Manning. So there was more hype because of that, because that was
the Tennessee.
Well, he won a national championship the next following year.
The Tennessee factor adds a huge amount of hype on top of that. Some other choices on our text line quickly: Chris Brown, Andre Woolfolk, Kenny Britt.
Now, Andre Woolfolk is one.
Okay,
that is one. Now, Kenny Britt, no.
Kendall Wright was another
the name
one
before that.
Chris Brown.
Chris Brown, not really. He had a 1,000-yard season. Then
Chris
he
Brown
came back with
good.
800 yards. He just never was able to sustain anything. And he got hurt too. The Chase is telling me he got hurt because I only played with Chris 1 year, I think, maybe 2.
Chris Brown,
I think,
player,
2 years.
But Andre Woolfolk was a first-round pick in 2003.
I'm gonna tell you a quick story about that one.
Please.
Listen, when they drafted Andre Woolfolk, first-round draft, and I think the late great Floyd Reese, if he was here today, he would agree with me. He's their number one. He's their first pick in the first round. DB out of Oklahoma, 6'1", shut down. I mean, he got everything. He was the man in college. I played against him while I was at Michigan State. When he was in Nebraska. No, I'm thinking of another guy. But he was a shutdown corner in Oklahoma. The minute he stepped on the field here and started playing, we knew exactly he wasn't that guy.
How'd you know?
You just saw it, man. He wasn't. If he was drafted later on, then okay, you can kind of say, okay, we develop. But he was a first round pick, and when he stepped on the field, it was everybody knew, like he's not a number one DB. He's not. and he never became a number one DB.
No, he was a very disappointing
guy
because he was drafted right after you. Wasn't he drafted the year after you went to the Super Bowl? Or am I getting it was
think
right
what
in,
was
right in that
that?
window?
It might have
03?
been.
He was drafted in 2003.
Yeah, he was drafted in 03.
Oh,
So
2003. So you
we-
guys were a really good team trying
Yeah.
to stay on top.
Exactly.
That time.
Yeah, he never did. I mean, the kid never saw the field, really, honestly, man.
Nope.
And
Never made
it
an
was,
impact.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he played 4 seasons here, but a lot of it he dealt with injury. He could never stay on the field, and I mean, he was one of those guys that, yeah, what he did in college definitely couldn't translate to the NFL.
615-737-1025. Excellent participation, everybody. Thank you so much. And I can't wait until we do this exercise next year and the text line is flooded with Xavier Restrepo. Remember Xavier Restrepo? That was fun. 615-737-1025. We will switch gears coming up next. Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL insider, who is live on location in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, covering the Stanley Cup final. We will speak to him coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan. 1025-1063 The Game. D-Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. And we are presented by Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan. We will be joined momentarily by Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL Insider, presented by Old National Bank. Get Old. Elliot just wrapping up some stuff in Edmonton. That is where the Stanley Cup final is. Oilers win game 1, 4-3 in overtime on a power play goal by Leon Draisaitl. As we wait for Elliot, I do want to provide an update on something we discussed yesterday as it relates to the NHL and the state tax, no state tax thing that we have talked about so much over the past few years because of all of the Southern teams that have been succeeding in the NHL. Gary Bettman, the NHL commissioner, and Bill Daly, the deputy commissioner, before the start of every Stanley Cup final, they hold a State of the NHL address of sorts, and this was a topic of conversation. And according to Chris Johnston of The Athletic, quote, while Bill Daly acknowledged that some of the league's clubs have raised the state income tax thing as an issue, he said the NHL's head office doesn't, quote, share the level of concern that they have. Quote, these imbalances have existed forever, Daly said Wednesday. There's nothing new here. There are so many reasons why a player may choose to play in a particular location for a particular team, for a particular coach that have nothing to do with the tax situation in that market. So I don't think it's anything we're going to address proactively as part of this collective bargaining negotiation. So, Willie, glad to hear that the NHL doesn't seem to think that this is a huge deal.
Yeah, because it allows Nashville to continue to use the advantage, and it is an advantage, I believe. I thought it was interesting. Elliot, and he can elaborate on this when we get him on in his podcast, said the Players Association really doesn't think it's worth fighting for. Because as you said, D-Mace, when you are in that chair as a player negotiating, you got to decide, what are we going to fight for? What's worth fighting for? And what can we live with? Right?
Yes.
So they don't think it's a big deal. I guarantee you, many of them are aware of their paycheck and how much stays in their paycheck and how much is taxed.
Of course.
But I think collectively they don't really say this is the hill we want to die on.
We do have Elliot Freeman on our phone line, driven by Wilson County, Hyundai.com Sportsnet NHL Insider, presented by Old National Bank. Get Old. So, Elliot, a thrilling comeback for the Edmonton Oilers last night, ignited by two former members of the Nashville Predators, Victor Arvidsson and Matthias Ekholm. I do want to ask you about Ekholm specifically. We here in Nashville had the pleasure of watching Ekholm for several years. He was perennially underrated, I think, in the NHL when he was playing in Nashville. I know that he had many playoff runs, the Stanley Cup final in 2017, but seeing him with the Edmonton Oilers, he's on the biggest stage each of these past two seasons. Just how vital has Ekholm been to the success of the Edmonton Oilers since he joined the organization a couple of years ago?
Well, I think that, Adam, that Ekholm is one of those rare people who comes up to Canada and we aren't suddenly picking his carcass and saying, oh my God, this is everything that's wrong about his game. That he's one of those players who comes up here and actually the legend grows. And, I think, for example, he's a great skater. He's an extremely competitive player. He's low maintenance, as you guys know. But I think the other thing that really helped him is that he and his family have really embraced the city. And, with all the talk about how hard it is to attract players to Canada and how many guys want to play in Canada as opposed to being in tax havens like Nashville, Tennessee, here's a guy who has arrived. His family loves it. He loves it. And it's very obvious that he is incredibly respected by the McDavid-Draisaitl leadership duo. Like when you see them together, they listen to what he has to say. They care about his opinion. And look, like last night, the point when he scored the tying goal, the point, Ekholm, McDavid to each other, like that's two guys who really respect each other. And his legend has grown since he was traded to Northern Alberta.
Another Predators adjacent piece of news yesterday, the Pittsburgh Penguins hired Dan Hughes, former Predators assistant coach, as their head coach. And I'll be honest with you, Elliot, I was surprised to see this. I wasn't sure that Dan Muse had NHL head coaching potential. I figured he might just be a really good assistant coach, but didn't think that he was on the short list to become an NHL head coach. Were you surprised by Muse's hiring in Pittsburgh? And what does that say about the direction the Penguins are going in, hiring a first-time head coach for that veteran organization?
Well, I was surprised. I think I was the first guy to mention that he was interviewed on one of our, I think I mentioned him on a couple of previous pods that I'd heard he'd been interviewed, and I heard he was, and then like initially I thought, Adam, it was just, you do the first round by Zoom and then you narrow it down. I thought he'd just been a Zoom interview, but someone said no, like he went to Pittsburgh and he had a face-to-face. So immediately I was like, wow, like that's interesting. And when I mentioned his name on the pod, like I had some people reach out to me and they were kind of like, there's no way he's getting that job. Like he's a smart young guy, but he's not going to be the next head coach of Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I kind of discounted it. And then I started to hear yesterday morning, about an hour before the announcement, that he was probably going to be the guy. And I was like scrambling to confirm it. And first of all, I tip my cap to him, because but one of the things I really believe, Adam, is that the right people are always watching. Whether someone's name is well known out there or it isn't, if you do good work, the right people always know it, whether we realize it or not. And I'll say this about him. I had a number of people reach out to me who said that he's one of those guys that fits that description. He doesn't call a lot of attention to himself. He's not like a physically imposing person. Like I guess he's listed at like 5'10", 178 or something like that when he played. So like you wouldn't look at him and say, wow, like there's someone who necessarily commands the room. But what I did hear about him was he was the first guy to arrive and the last guy to leave. And he never took a shortcut on the work. I like to see those guys get rewarded. I think this is a huge challenge for him, because what it says to me is that Kyle Dubas is serious about rebuilding the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I don't know if tearing it down to the studs is the right word, because you have Crosby there. But he's serious about that this is going to be a rebuild, and they are. And one thing about Muse is he has a history with young players. He knows how to deal with them. He knows how to handle them. He's won in junior hockey. He's coached the national development team, and Pittsburgh is going young. That's what it says to me, that Kyle Dubas is serious about what he's talking about, and he wanted a coach who could deal with young players.
Elliot, one more for me before I hand it off to Derek. You had an update on your podcast earlier this week about Jonathan Marchessault. We have been under the impression that he has had a modified no-trade clause in his contract. You reported he has a full no-movement clause in his contract, which complicates things a little bit, depending on what the Predators decide to do with Marchessault. As we discussed last week, he has only played in non-tax states, from Tampa Bay to Florida to Vegas to Nashville. So as we play armchair GM with this, should we focus our attention on teams in non-tax states?
Well, I have to tell you, first of all, a lot of this happened because of my hit with you last week, when I said that there was a limited amount of places that Marchessault was willing to go. And then someone reached out to me after and said, you're wrong about that. Nashville has more control. So I said it on the pod, and then someone else said to me, you're wrong about that. And that he has the full no move through the end of the 2027-28 season. And so Marchessault does have a lot of control on this. I'll say this. I think that this is the biggest contract of Marchessault's career. So I do think he wants to protect that. And I think there's something very right about that. I don't think that there's anything wrong with him wanting to do that. However, I have been told that he is willing to judge it on a case-by-case basis. And if he thinks a situation is good for him and his family, he will consider it. So I've been told not necessarily to like. I do think he wants to protect the contract as much as he can, Adam. But I've also been told that if it makes sense in terms of winning and family, not to throw things out in the garbage.
Now, Elliot, do you think that affects how the how how about to say David Poyle, but how Barry Trotz move forward with this? Because obviously something, because of what happened last year, something has to change. He retains the coach. So you had to have some conversations with all these guys, not just once, but twice. But how do they proceed now that we know it? They already knew it. But do they continue to try to potentially see if there's a place for Marchessault, or do they look in another direction?
I think they will continue to look. Like, I do think there is a willingness there to explore this. I think that the team has made it clear they would like to explore this. And I think the player has made it clear that he is willing to consider it. Again, at the end of the day, Marchessault has the contractually earned right to decide if he's willing to accept it or not. But I think both sides know there's a willingness to explore it. I think the one of the biggest questions here is, what do the Predators think is an acceptable return? You know that people are going to try to squeeze you. That's what they did. Like, these GMs are like sharks in the water, right, Derek? So I think they're going to try to say, well, like, Marchessault is a good player. They're going to say, I'm not sure about the term or the contract. What are you going to do to sweeten it for us? And Barry Trotz is going to say, you know what, this guy is a couple of years away from being the MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Like, come on. So I think one of the biggest parts to all of this is going to be the poker involved in making the trade, and how does Trotz feel, or does his research out there tell him he has to sweeten it to make it work, or does he simply say, we're not doing that? And so I think that is still to be determined here.
Great point. And Elliot, it is so interesting you mentioned that, because I wanted to ask you about Matt Duchene, another guy that the Predators made a very difficult decision on a couple years ago, and it has played out very interesting, because I think the Predators felt that for the price they were paying him and the responsibility on him, it was underwhelming the return. Then he goes to Dallas for 2 years as a $3 million guy, and he exceeded expectations in the regular season. That's an easy one. But as they really needed him in the playoffs, he didn't have a great playoff. But so the next contract is really intriguing to me for him, because as he said, I think that his quote was something, I want some stability. I don't want to just go year to year here.
Yeah, I think I think he wants stability. Look, he wants the biggest and best contract that he can get, and I can't blame him for that. Everybody tries to do that. That's been I think his preference, though, I think would be to stay. Matt Duchene has been around enough situations that didn't work out their best for him, that he knows a good situation when he sees it. It's a good situation for him in Dallas. The biggest challenge, though, there is that Dallas has some big decisions to make. I believe they want to keep another friend of Nashville, that being Michael Granlund. I think they want him to continue being a part of their Finnish mafia there. So, they only have about $5 million in cap room, and Granlund's going to command a nice ticket. So that says to me, if they are going to keep him, they're going to have to make some very difficult decisions, and it's possible Duchene could be one of them. So I think he'd like to stay in Dallas. I think he knows it's worked out for him there, but at the very least, he has to be open to the possibility that his best offer might not be in Dallas.
As Derek likes to say on the show all the time, the market will tell you what you're worth. So it is going to be interesting to follow those storylines, especially with the choices that Dallas has to make. I want to ask you about the goalie interference last night. You brought it up on your pod this morning, and I was thinking the same thing. I saw Sam Bennett, who we know is a wily, crafty player who will get on the line, bend the rules, do all those things. I saw a guy who I think I will use the word flopped, right? He got tripped, yes, but he made no attempt to keep his balance. It's like, hey, you pushed me a little bit into the pool. Do I want to act and just be funny about it and fly back into the pool and make a big splash so everybody laughs? Or do I want to try to keep my balance and not fall in the pool? He fell in the pool, and he wanted to fall in the pool.
There was a quick shot. I don't know if you guys can. I don't know if the TNT broadcast or camera showed the same shot, but after the ruling, our cameras cut to the bench, and Bennett had this big smile on his face, and I was just laughing. Like it was almost as if, like, when you're a kid and you try something, like, I can't believe I got away with that. Like that, it was just a funny look he had on his face. I'm with you, Willie. I didn't think it should have counted, but I'll say this, Willie. Like, most of the people who reached out to me about it, they felt it should have been a good goal because of the defensive contact. And in the playoffs, goalie interference challenges, the teams are 0 for 4. So the league is making it very clear you've got to give us a really good reason to take off a goal. What that does is it sets a tone for the series too. It's like, all I want is it's got to be consistent from here on in. If it gets challenged again, I want to see it called the same way. But what that says is if a defenseman pushes you in front of the crease, you have the license to, I guess, as you say, go flop city and see where you end up.
Is there a better shooter? Like, I know we have a lot of good shooters, and you've seen him. You mentioned Mike Bossy a lot, and I grew up watching him a lot. I was just a kid, so I wasn't studying as much. But Leon Draisaitl, when there's a certain when he gets the puck, and of course he's got one of the greatest passers too, setting him up, that game-winning goal. But it was so vintage, where he doesn't need as much time as virtually anybody else, and his accuracy is incredible. That was so vintage, McDavid to Draisaitl.
On that right side of the net, if the game was in Edmonton and Draisaitl was standing outside Tootsie's, I would be shocked if he didn't score. Like from that area, he can't miss. Like, anytime he misses from there, I honestly can't believe it. I cannot believe when he misses from there. And the thing is too, is where I sit for these playoff games, we're at the top of the lower bowl and basically right behind the benches. I saw that whole play unfolding. The moment the Oilers got the puck down low or towards the low end of the ice, I was like, this game's over. And Barkov is one of the best players in the world, but you put him on a 2-on-1, basically in his own zone against McDavid and Draisaitl, even he's got to hope those two screw it up. And they weren't screwing that one up on the power play.
That's right.
Elliot, before we let you go, we were talking about this before you joined us, but Bill Daly and Gary Bettman talked before game 1 last night. The state income tax issue was brought up. Bill Daly said this is not an issue that the NHL really needs to concern itself with. Do you think that the teams that may be raising this as an issue will go quietly, or do you think that they'll still try to make a way for this to be legislated in the CBA?
I just don't think there's going to be a choice because after Daly and Bettman talked, the two leads of the Players Association, Marty Walsh and the former player Ron Hainsey, they had a brief scrum, and Hainsey basically said the players aren't concerned about it either. So if you've got the league saying and you've got the players saying then there's not enough strength to bring it into the negotiation. I think the other thing too is, and some of the teams that are really affected by it, they say, look, like the teams that are no tax states, they don't want to give up their advantage. So I'm sure that the people who run the Nashville Predators are looking at this like, why would we, and combined with Dallas and Vegas and the Florida teams, and I think Seattle too is a no tax state. I think those teams would sit there and say, why would we allow it to legislate one of our advantages out of the game? I just don't think there's enough support for this, Adam, to end it. I think the other thing too is they really want to get this CBA done. I just don't think there's enough for people to fight over. There's no will to fight here. They right now they've got a good thing going, and they want to try to get there as quick as they can.
Quickly, last one for you, Elliot. We know that this NHL draft will be decentralized. I know the NHL will probably go back to the normal format next summer.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering about the NHL scouting combine, because we know that a lot of important trades and deals and such get done on the draft floor because all of the GMs and the scouts, they're in the same place at the same time. Will the NHL scouting combine replace that this year, since there will be no opportunity?
Yes. Like everybody's there, and the names are flying. Like there's no question that this is a very, very big event for that kind of thing. And if there isn't stuff done by the weekend, the groundwork will be laid for it to be done when the proper time comes.
Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet NHL insider, joining us as he does every Thursday. Sponsored.
Can we get one more inside from Elliot? And this is inspired by Joe Dubin, because Greg Wyshynski, Elliot, goes on our show before we come on. So our mid-morning show, if you will. Joe Dubin, one of our hosts, asked Greg Wyshynski if he was going to be hopping on a yak en route from Edmonton to Florida, and you did this last year, but they're of course fascinated by the distance between Edmonton and South Florida. What are your plans on how you're going to get from Edmonton to Sunrise?
Well, there is a charter. I think there's 75 seats on it, and
so no yaks.
No yak. I am on the charter. I think there's 12 people from Sportsnet who have been given the opportunity to fly the charter. And so we're doing that. And I'm not going to knock it. We are lucky because, it's funny. I was sitting here, Willie, you would know John Allers and Brian Hayward, who are the Anaheim broadcast team. They did I think the international feed, I think it was, of the Dallas-Edmonton series last round, the Western Final. And Game 2 in Dallas was a night game. Game 3 in Edmonton was an afternoon game, 36 hours later. You cannot get directly from Edmonton to Dallas, and they didn't get there in time. So I am very glad to be taking this charter.
Oh, my goodness, poor guys.
Elliot Freeman, presented by Old National Bank. Get old. Elliot, great stuff as always. Enjoy Game 2. We'll talk next week.
All right, guys. Have a great week.
Elliot Freeman joining us on the program. 615-737-1025. I mentioned the NHL Scouting Combine. The NHL Draft is, I believe, 3 weeks from tomorrow. It will be here sooner than you know it. And I did an exercise about what it might take for the Predators to trade up in the NHL Draft. And I will present my findings coming up next. 615-737-1025. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game.
All right, let's talk Loan Pronto. And let's say you're sitting there going, hey, Willie, you read my mind. I was just thinking about how I'm going to do my home improvement project. How am I going to fund it? I've got the vision. I got the plan. I got the people, but I need to pay those people. Here's what you do. Call Loan Pronto right now, 615-499-5780. If you're a homeowner and you want to make your home more valuable with that upgrade of a home improvement project, Loan Pronto can use your home's equity to do it, and they can get you that cash fast. They can get improved. You can get approved, rather, in 24 hours or less. And then the process is very streamlined. It's quick. I've been through it myself. Your home's equity is yours, and you can use it to your advantage. So call Loan Pronto right now. They're A+ rated by the BBB and have nearly 2,500 five-star Google reviews. So get that home improvement project started by calling 615-499-5780 or going to loanpronto.com. That's 615-499-5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781 on approved credit, and MLSconsumeraccess.org.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The Game, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Always great to catch up with Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet on the scene in Edmonton for the Stanley Cup Final. But 3 weeks from tomorrow is the first round of the NHL draft. The Predators have the 5th overall selection in that first round. I was reading a mock draft this morning from Corey Pronman of The Athletic. He selected James Hagans out of Boston College at number 5 in his latest mock draft. I've seen Hagans to the Predators a lot in mock drafts. When we had Scott Wheeler on, also of The Athletic, we had him on a few weeks ago. We talked a lot about James Hagans. But then I wondered, what would it take for the Predators to trade up in the NHL draft? They did not have luck on their side in the NHL draft lottery. They moved down 2 spots from number 3 to number 5. And as we talked about in the lead up to the NHL draft lottery and immediately after, you don't see the kind of NFL draft style trade up, trade down types of trades in the NHL. Think of the trade we saw in the first round of the NFL draft, the Browns and the Jaguars, that involved Travis Hunter. We don't really see that in the NHL. But I stumbled across this fun little tool on Puckpedia, the Perry Pick Value Calculator. It was developed by Matt Perry, not the actor who played Chandler Bing on Friends. Rest in peace, Matthew Perry. But it was developed by Matt Perry, the former director of hockey analytics for the Arizona Coyotes. So we've seen these types of charts in the NFL where certain picks have a numerical value. And Matt Perry developed this for the Arizona Coyotes. So I wanted to see what it would take, guys, for the Predators to move up from number 5 to number 2. The San Jose Sharks have the number 2 overall pick in the NHL draft. The number 2 overall pick in the draft, according to Matt Perry, has a value of 72.69. The Predators' number 5 overall pick has a value of 50.13, which is a difference of 22.56. Bear with me here while I get all nerdy with you. To make a fair trade involving these picks, the Predators would have to make up that difference. Again, 22.56, the difference between the value of the number 2 pick and the number 5 pick. So I did a little mock trade. I added the number 23 overall pick, which the Predators have from the Tampa Bay Lightning. That has a value of 16.01. So we're not there yet. Then, according to Tankathon, the Predators' second round pick is number 35. So I added that. That adds 9.07 for a total of 75.21. So the Sharks actually come out a little bit ahead in this example. So I will throw this to you, Willie Donick. If you were the Predators, would you be willing to trade the number 5 overall pick, the number 23 overall pick, and the number 35 overall pick for the number 2 overall pick?
Not in a million years. not this year. If it were kind of a thing of McDavid, Eichel, which I believe were the 1-2 in 2015 or 16?
2015.
And you had that type of pedigree for these guys, maybe I would consider it. But this year, look, I haven't watched any of these guys play. I saw James Hagans a little bit in the Beanpot tournament. I've seen highlights of these guys. I don't know. But it just seems to me that when kids are that young and they don't have the tag of a McDavid, of a Bedard, of an Eichel, some of the guys that have come through, Austin Matthews would be another fairly recent example. Guys who people have had their eye on, Nathan McKinnon, when they were 14 or 15 years old, going, you know what, this guy's going to be really good. I think there's some guys in next year's draft that are getting that kind of momentum. This group doesn't have that. And so I think you mentioned percentages and what it's worth. To me, it's a little bit of a roll of the dice. How do you know that the 5th pick won't be better than the 2nd pick straight up anyway? What are the odds? We don't know. They're 18 years old. They're all really good. James Hagans was at the top of the mock draft for a good long while before his stock kind of dipped a little bit. But these are just little small chapters in a long career span, right? A guy could maybe have half a bad season. He could come back next year and have a great season. So there's too many variables that make it that would make it worth giving up that kind of. I would rather just take the picks, take those throws at the dartboard, and I think you're going to be better off in the long run.
So that would
I'm a no way Jose.
That would involve 3 of the Predators' top 4 draft picks because they would have number 5 overall. They have number 23 overall from the Lightning. It would exclude the Vegas pick, which I believe is number 28, and it would be their first second-round pick, which, according to Tankathon.com, is number 35. So I do have a couple of responses to this. One texter says, if Michael Misa was available at number 2, yes. Jeff says, yes, and I wouldn't think twice. If you can get a Jack Hughes type, you go for it. The 20 and 35 picks will just lead to drafting redundant players. And I was reminded of this, Willie, as I was doing this exercise when we had Scott Wheeler on a few weeks ago, and you asked him about the caliber of prospects near the end of the first round and the beginning of the second round. He wasn't very high on that group of players.
No, he was not.
So I imagine that the teams who are doing all of the scouting may feel the same way. So maybe the San Jose Sharks wouldn't accept my hypothetical offer. But the value of the number 2 pick from moving from 5 to 2, according to the Perry Pick value calculator, would be number 5, number 23, and number 35. Willie Donick says no.
Let's take Michael Misa, right? What we presume is this kid Schaefer, who's a defenseman, will be the first pick. Misa is the consensus second pick. Now, the texter has done his homework, obviously, and he has seen a lot of the mock drafts that have Misa, who is a center, right? Hagens is also a center. And I think if you wind the clock back about a year, it was Hagens that was probably right up there. So what makes our texter, I would ask the question back to the texter. He said, if you got a chance to get Misa, now I don't know if he is from Misa's hometown or watches Misa a lot. I would ask, how do you know that Misa is that much of a separator from Hagens, based on what I just said?
See, I
don't know the answer to that.
I don't know
Maybe
the answer to that as well.
I don't know about that, though.
One texter says, if that's all it takes, you do it in a heartbeat and get Misa. Misa is that guy, Willie says, is missing in this draft. No way that's all it is. That's Lorne on our text line. I assume he means no way that's all it is, as in that's all it would take to move up from 5 to 2.
I see what he's saying. But I go back to it. Like, if maybe these guys know better than I do, but there are plenty of hyped up guys who get drafted in the second overall spot that don't turn out to be any great shakes. And there are guys who are the 5th pick in the same draft that end up better. I'm going by that principle. I haven't done a deep dive on how much better Misa is in his evaluation right now than Hagens.
I think one thing that sticks out about Hagens, and Scott Wheeler mentioned this with us a few weeks ago, is his size. Misa is listed at 6'1", 184 pounds. Hagens is listed at 5'10", 177 pounds. So he is a smaller player. He is expected to be a big-time point producer if he reaches his ceiling at the NHL level. And if Hagens falls to number 5, I think that would be quite advantageous for the Predators. But I was wondering about this because, as I said, we don't see a lot of this in the NHL. We don't see a lot of picks being traded to move up or down in the draft. But yes, according to the Perry Pick value calculator, developed by Matt Perry, formerly of the Arizona Coyotes, who are now the Utah Mammoth, by the way. The hockey club, Derek, has been eliminated. They are now the Utah Mammoth.
Oh, wow.
So get used to that.
God, that's Mammoth. Oh,
the Mammoth.
Utah Mammoth.
That's weird to me.
Yeah.
Just a bad name.
U of M.
Yes. You can't put U and M that close together for Derek Mason. But, okay, so before we get to Jared Stillman on the other side, 615-737-1025. If you were Barry Trotz, would you offer the number 5 overall pick, the number 23 overall pick, and the number 35 overall pick? So that's 3 of your top 4 picks this draft in 3 weeks. Would you take number 5, number 23, and number 35 to move up to 2? 615-737-1025. Jared Stillman, who says to me he has something to discuss with all of us, is coming up next. We'll do that next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game.
Happy Thursday, everyone. This is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge and his staff over at Cool Springs MD for some time. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a resolution or some type of goal to shed some extra pounds only to face disappointment. But I got some answers for you because at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. And they will customize, just as they did for me. They will customize a specific program just for you and you only. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063, The Game. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. Stillman and Company. Coming up next, we welcome in Jared Stillman. Jared, I know that you have something to discuss with us, but before we get to that, I do want to ask you the question I just laid out for all of our listeners, because I found a pick value calculator for the NHL. You would do it?
Yes,
okay.
I would make the trade.
Okay.
I would trade up to number 2, and I would take Michael.
So you've studied Michael Misa as opposed to James Hagens or somebody like that. You think Misa's that much better?
I would say that I have had conversations with people who would know, and What I have been told is Misa is what I've been told is that the Schaefer kid, the defenseman, is really, really good. And that Misa is really, really good. And that the other players are good. And I have talked to people that would know. Have I watched the tape? No, I have not. But just from the conversations I've had, it feels like there is kind of 1-2 punch. What's your flavor, defense or offense, at the beginning, and then everybody else behind it. So I would make the trade because from what I'm told, and Misa put up a bunch of goals in juniors this year, from what I'm told, Misa is a very big impact player.
All right. So you say you have something that you want to include us in on. So go right ahead.
Okay. I just did earlier today at CMA Fest. Caroline Fenton and I are hosting for SiriusXM and ESPN some sort of CMA Fest show. And it's on the College Sports Channel. And Caroline, and I think we all have a ton of respect for Caroline, right?
Of course.
You guys are going to have to talk to her.
What's going
because
on?
she is the only person I know who is not being directly paid by the Big Ten Conference, who is in favor of the 4-4-2-2 college football playoff model instead of the model that pretty much every single other person on the planet is in favor of, which is the 5 automatic qualifiers. Win your conference championship, you're in, and then everybody else at large. She is in favor of the Big Ten getting 4 spots every year. The SEC would be giving up bids if they agree to this. So I don't think the SEC is going to go for it because I think the SEC is smart. But we've all had that friend that we know is a smart person, and then they say something that is so unbelievable. And I could not believe what I heard come out of Caroline's mouth this morning.
Let's go to our Big Ten expert, Derek Mason. Your thoughts?
Listen, I like the way it is now. I mean, I don't think we should go in here and change a bunch of things. This is all built for the SEC and the Big Ten to get more teams into the college football playoffs. That's the way it started. Once we went from 4 teams, we knew it's not about everybody else. It's about the Big Ten and the SEC. And that's where they're going to get it. So no matter what happens, as long as the SEC and the Big Ten benefit from it, that is what they will agree to.
Well, my big thing with that
does this have to do with the pickle in the pouch thing? Is that what Caroline?
You don't agree with that?
The other day.
Do you agree with that, Jared?
Well, I believe that the reason that we have 16 teams is because of the SEC.
You don't think it has anything to do with the Big Ten as well?
So the Big Ten, I think, wants the 4-4-2-2 because they want to guarantee themselves 4 playoff teams. The SEC does not need to guarantee themselves 4 playoff teams. If the SEC agrees to this model with the 2 automatic bids for the ACC and the Big 12, the SEC would have been giving up a playoff team last year as opposed to they would have been giving up 2 playoff teams the year before. So the SEC in a 16-team playoff, and we're going to 16, even though I don't think we need 16 teams, the SEC is going to get 6 or 7 teams in every year, regardless if it's 4-4-2-2 or not. So it's really only the Big Ten that wants the 4-4-2-2 because they want to get their 4 automatic spots. And I just think that is ridiculous. Caroline's theory is that if you don't go 4-4-2-2, then there would be no need, with everybody fighting for at-large bids, there would be no need to play the early season interconference matchups. The Alabama-Wisconsin matchup, the Florida State-LSU matchup, that there would be no point in doing that. And so that will go away at the beginning of the year. And I just don't agree with that. I just think that the Big Ten wants a cash grab here. They want the 4 guaranteed spots. I think the SEC would be crazy. I mean, absolutely crazy for accepting this because they'd be giving up playoff teams, historically speaking. And so again, she's the only person on the planet who I feel like, again, I think is smart and is not in the satchel of the Big Ten who thinks they should go 4-4-2-2. I could not believe it. I was sitting up there at CMA Fest on the fanfare stage with Caroline, and I was looking at her like in her eyes, and I'm like, do you actually believe this? Like, Or is this like how Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless used to do it, which was I'll take one side and you take the other side? I could not believe myself.
I'm surprised.
Now we know how people feel about you a lot of times.
Yeah.
When you make these strong
Jared, is this the
but
biggest
you guys
sports
don't have the same respect for my opinions that you have for hers.
So you expect it from us.
Jared, is this the biggest sports disagreement that you and Caroline have had?
I mean, boy, I'd have to really think about that. Recently, yes. I'm sure we've had other sports disagreements.
You usually are aligned on things in the history of the program.
All right, I want to ask a question though, kid.
Yeah, I'm surprised that she's agreeing with like the 4-4-4 because
I agree it's stupid.
Yeah, because it takes away from teams at the and she's a SEC person.
Right. That's what's surprising about it. But let me ask you, Jared. Let's take the power and the money leverage that the Big Ten and the SEC have, and just ask the question in a 16-team format: what is the maximum amount of teams a league should have? I'm not saying that there's a right or wrong answer here. I have my opinion, but I don't think you should leverage your way into saying we got to get all of these teams in. Like, what's the right balance of a national tournament?
I agree. I mean, and I think the baseball tournament has really what's opened my eyes to this, which is a week ago today, everybody thought that the SEC was just so much better at baseball than everybody else. And the SEC only has 4 teams in the Super Regional. The ACC has 5 teams in the Super Regional. And again, not to say that if you were to play 7-game series, would Texas lose to Texas San Antonio 4 times? Probably not. But again, that's the whole point of the tournament. I agree with you, Willie, because if you talk to people that are just true blue SEC, they'll tell you that the SEC should have all 16 teams in there, that Vanderbilt should get in there before Clemson gets in there or whatever. So I don't really know the way to answer that other than I just feel comfortable with, all right, you're going to get a chance if you're in any of these conferences to play your way into the tournament. It's going to be hard, but you're going to be able to play your way in. After that, then we really do sit there and debate the merits. However you want to do it, the computers with the BCS or the playoff committee or whatever. But I do think that there should be at least a discussion about, do we really think that the 3rd best ACC team is better than the 4th best Big Ten team? Because that might be the case. And I just don't think that giving the Big Ten 4 spots no matter what is really the right way to build a national championship tournament.
Jared, it was brought to my attention by a texter that yesterday, as you were discussing Cam Ward and his 5 o'clock wake-up call, which you praised him for, by the way, for not making it about himself.
Correct.
But you compared it to when you used to show up at 11 a.m. to prepare for your 2 o'clock show.
11:30.
I'm sorry, 11:30. I just want to make sure that that the texter wanted to bring it to our attention. I just wanted to make sure that that's something that you actually said on the air.
No, when I first got here, when we first started doing Jared and the GM, I'd show up at 11:30. I mean, you guys remember I come in here and chat with you guys all the time.
And now you show up to the studio once every 2 or 3 months. So.
But I would show up at 11:30 because I wanted everybody to know how hard I was working. And I do think there's a certain element of that, where, again, instead of talking about it, you just do it. And I appreciate the fact that when Cam Ward was asked about it, Cam was really kind of, I got a lot of stuff to do. So I get there at 5 a.m. And then when asked what time he goes to bed and what time he wakes up, Cam was like, I kind of keep that to myself right there, which Chris Sanders and I were laughing about yesterday because you guys know good well.
He stays
you
up
guys
late.
know where the facilities are. He's staying, Derek, in one of those hotels right by the facility. He's probably waking up at 4:55 and just going. He's not taking a shower and getting ready for work.
Why? You take a shower at the facility.
Right. He's going over there, going right to breakfast at the facility and then right to work, which I appreciate.
Exactly.
But that's part of the reason probably why Cam didn't want to tell people what time he woke up at, because he didn't want to say, I wake up at 4:55, roll out of bed, show up here at the facility. The other thing was people, Cam probably didn't want to talk about how he stays up late playing Fortnite, apparently, was a reason that the text line thought that Cam might not disclose what time he goes to bed. What time do you think Cam goes to bed, Derek?
Oh, man. Young guy like that, man. You can't even, I don't think you can force yourself to go to bed at like 10 o'clock. You that young? I think he goes to bed about 12.
I was going to say 1.
Yeah, 12. Because I'm thinking back when I was that young. I had a family too, but still, I even if I tried to go to bed at 12 or 10, it wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening because I wasn't that tired. So
you think Cam is basically going from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. with his sleep schedule, and that's good enough for the whole day?
I think he manages to get some rest in between, but he's right, man. You got to these because he's not a veteran guy. See, veteran guys can kind of pull back a little bit once you've been in the league a while, because even though you built your regiment, you don't feel you got to get everything in. Cam has so much on his plate now. There's only so many hours in a day, so he feels that he has to learn all of this stuff. So getting up at 4:55, being at the building at 5, and then going home and going back to bed at 12, he's probably used to that. I'm not going to say he's always going to be that way, but right now I think he does need to be that way because he's the one person on that team that needs to know everything about the offense and everything about that building. He is the one person that needs to know it. So you, like the coaches, like the head coach, you got to come in early.
As long as the Titans don't have to build in a no Fortnite clause in his contract. Didn't Kyler Murray have a video game thing?
Yes.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
If
apparently
the
he was
Titans
spending a
have
little
to
too
do
much time
that,
doing
I'm
that.
going to say this. If they have to do that, they picked the wrong guy. And I don't
We got
think
a
they're going to
problem.
have to do that.
No, I don't think so
agree.
either.
We got a
Yeah,
problem.
I
if it
agree
comes
with
to
that
But
one.
I'm not. I don't want to be that guy. But remember, the science of sports. Sleep is important. You do have to.
No,
get your
you
rest.
got to get your rest, man. You have to, and I'm sure.
I sound like a parent.
He finds a way.
You are a parent.
That's why I say he finds the way to get his rest. But right now, for the next maybe 2 months, he's not going to be able to get as much rest.
That'll do it for us today. Stoneman & Company coming up next.
Be love on your people. Have a safe, blessed, wonderful Thursday. Peace.